Obviously, with F1 Academy being in its infancy, and we've been very bold and disruptive of how we've done things, it's always challenging myself, okay, how can we do that better? How can we be even more bold and more disruptive this season? Even with the F1 teams being on board now, the idea that every F1 team supports a young female driver, that's something I'm so proud of, because when I was racing, it was so different to how it is now. And I'm very conscious that F1 Academy can't just be something which is shiny and new and exciting and then dies away in a few years. We need to set ourselves up for success in the long term, because it's only by racing year after year and creating these opportunities on and off track year after year that we'll really see the difference long term. And when I joined Mercedes, they wanted to give me 20 kilos less than my teammates because they said that will help you race at the front. And whether I was just too naive or too fierce, I said, no, I don't need any help. I can race at this level on the same weight because I believe I'm capable of it. And if I look back at that young girl today, I think, wow, I had so much confidence in my own abilities. Hi, my name is Susie Wolff, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
Wonderful to have you on the program, Susie. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
I know that the off season for you is just as busy as the on season, but how does one spend a February at the beginning of 2025? Tell me about your off season.
Well, our off season starts with when the season ends. It's the moment where we all take a deep breath, and we normally go to the Austrian mountains because my husband is Austrian. And the sheer luxury for us is putting all of our suitcases away and not traveling and not having a schedule to adhere to actually have no alarm clock waking in the morning, not checking constantly which calls we're supposed to join or which countries we're supposed to be in. That really is for us a great luxury. And that enjoyment lasts for around 10 days to 2 weeks. And then we start to get itchy feet again, thinking, okay, when are things picking up again? Batteries are recharged and we want to get back into the hectic adrenaline-fueled life that we're used to. And when you come back to the office in January, it always hits you like a tsunami, because you realize, okay, there's only a short space of time to get everything done before we get racing again. But I personally really enjoy the beginning of every season because it's like a fresh start. You want to do things better. You want to look at where you'd maybe made mistakes, and it just gives you the chance to go again.
The new season is hope, isn't it?
You've hit the nail on the head. There's that renewed hope. And it's super interesting for me now running a series, because I don't have the huge ups and downs linked to performance that I was used to, not just in my own racing career, but then running the Formula E team, where it hangs so much on that on-track performance. So that edge has been taken away, but there's then a newfound eagerness to get it perfect on the way you're running the series. And obviously with F1 Academy being in its infancy, and we've been very bold and disruptive of how we've done things, it's always challenging myself, okay, how can we do that better? How can we be even more bold and more disruptive this season?
It's been described, I think it was just even last month, that after several years now with the Academy, that you said that you can feel a wave of impact, even if there's a lack of what you describe as hard data. And you've said that, unfortunately, fortunately, people within the community believe that data has to support everything. So let's talk about the wave, and then let's talk about the data. Where are you on both subjects?
Well, the first one, I spent nearly my whole life in this sport. I started racing at the age of 8, so I went through the world of karting. I went through the world of single-seaters. I obviously made it to Formula One, and then I ran a team on the other side. So I really get both sides of what we're trying to now do with F1 Academy. And when I was growing up and in the sport, it was so different to how it is now. There was no role models for me to look up to. There was never this idea of there being opportunities singled out because you were female. It was very much you were viewed as something different. And that brought the one benefit that you got a lot of media attention because you were the only one. But it's such a different landscape now. There are so many opportunities for young women. And the next generation have a clear pathway that they can now follow. And obviously, racing has that high financial barrier to entry, which we've managed to take away for these young, most talented female drivers. And even with the F1 teams being on board now, the idea that every F1 team supports a young female driver, that's something I'm so proud of, because when I was racing, it was so different to how it is now. And I'm very conscious that F1 Academy can't just be something which is shiny and new and exciting and then dies away in a few years. We need to set ourselves up for success in the long term, because it's only by racing year after year and creating these opportunities on and off track year after year that we'll really see the difference long term. And I'm also someone, by the way, that loves data to give you the feedback that what you're doing is bringing results, that it is being impactful. It's not just talk, it's not just ticking a diversity box. But the challenge for us is we're not the governing body of the sport. So we can't say, okay, well, how many extra license holders are there down to the fact that F1 Academy exists? But what we can feel is that there's movement where suddenly we see there's never been so many young girls in the world of karting. And all of my contacts from the world of karting call it the F1 Academy effect. Suddenly, there's a lot more young girls coming to the racetrack and they're all saying, well, I want to get to F1 Academy. And suddenly the goal is clear. And then in the world of motorsport, generally, there's just so many more successful women who are those strong role models for the next generation. And the paddock is just such a different place now than it was 10 years ago.
We had Samantha Tan on this program, and she said to us, as a young female driver working her way up through the ranks, she said, without the F1 Academy, I'm not sure that even any of this would be possible from a visibility standpoint. And you hit on it. The karting piece of it was the piece that was missing, because if you don't have a foundation, correct, then there's nowhere to build up to. So in a way, your efforts at the top have led to the efforts at the grassroots level. Is that accurate?
100% accurate. And for me, it was one of my first areas of focus. It's a numbers game.
Right.
The more we get participating, the more chance we have of the best rising to the top. And then on the other side, we need to make sure that our most talented are able to go and progress up the ladder. We cannot be something. Obviously, I made my life more difficult for myself by stating that a driver could only ever stay for 2 seasons. But that was to make sure that we move the talent upwards, but we also are able to create opportunity for the next generation, not that we end up with the same drivers year after year. So obviously, I like adding to my workload.
Well, some have described you as having a quiet confidence. That's how you've been described. Is that right? Is that fair, Susie?
It's difficult to think of how you are yourself. I don't always need to be the loudest person in the room. I don't always need to shout from the rooftops when I think we've achieved something great as a team. But quiet confidence, yeah, I have belief in that what I'm trying to create can be impactful. But I'm very tough on myself. I always like to keep challenging myself. I'm not good at staying in my comfort zone. And so even when things are running quite smoothly, I think, okay, what can I do more? What still left is there if I'm feeling comfortable right now?
So, I'll give you another fair or unfair characterization of you. A name synonymous with the fight for women in motorsport.
Well, that's one whoever said that, I would be very proud that they think that, because I don't view myself as an out and out feminist, but I do think in this sport, because of how long I've been in this sport, and I have a voice, I have a place at the table, and I want to use that for good. And if I can use that voice to help the next generation, it will be something which I will look back with proudly.
Have you always had that fight in you? And I'll ask related, does coming from a small town in Scotland make you that way?
I think I've always had that fight. And unfortunately for my husband, I still have that fight in me. He says, can you not just, calm down and enjoy an easy time? Because already my job is quite challenging. But I've realized that I'm a better wife and I'm a better mother. I'm a better individual when I've got a challenge on my hands. I love to be challenged, and I've got a lot of inner drive. And you're right. There's probably an element where I came from a small town and my parents gave me the best start in life I could have hoped for because they opened the world up. But I realized if I wanted to achieve what I wanted to achieve, I was going to have to work incredibly hard. But luckily for me, I love what I do. So even although I would like to think I work very hard, I enjoy what I do. And I feel in a privileged position that I'm able to be part of something which is creating a platform which makes it better for people.
Your mother was a daredevil. I mean, this does not come, the apple in the tree does not fall far. Your parents, they met because your mother bought a motorbike from your father, who tried to get her into the racing shop and into the biking world. Do I have that story correct?
Well, she was already in that world because her father, my gramps, was a very famous motocross rider in the 1950s. And my uncle won the Scottish Six-Day Trials. So she came from a successful two-wheeled family. And I think my gramps encouraged her to get her own bike. And of course, it was my dad's shop in the small town in Oban that she went to. And my dad says he didn't give her a discount, which shows that he wasn't immediately in love with her, but very quickly they found themselves.
But do you always remember I mean, your mother riding dirt bikes, like I said, being a daredevil? Is that something that's a fresh memory for you?
Very much so. And it definitely has formed me in a very strong way because I always saw her doing everything that my father did. My father raced, and he was obviously Isle of Man TT and some of the big road races, but they raced quads together. And I always grew up seeing both parents racing. But then on the other hand, my dad had his bike shop, and my mum, she opened her own dress shop. So she ran her own business, and she would get ready for work in the morning, be very glamorous, but then in the same time on the weekends, be out there racing with my dad. So she really set the blueprint of the fact that I could be both. I could be a racing driver, but there was nothing that said I needed to shy away from my femininity because I wasn't a typical tomboy. I loved Barbie, but I also loved motorbikes and then karting.
And indeed, that's what you did. Started karting, like you said earlier, at age 8. And by 13, you knew you were going to be a driver. I mean, you wanted to be a driver. But the best story, I think, is how you spent your student loan on a Formula Renault test day, right?
That's correct. But I
Tell
paid
me
for
about
all
that.
my loans. The challenge is that financial barrier in racing. And I come from a wonderful family, but we didn't have the means to spend a lot of money on single seaters. So I really had to scrimp and save where I could to go racing. And I was very lucky that I got a great sponsor that helped me through those Formula Renault years. But that old saying, the more you drive, the quicker you get, it does come down to how much you're in the car, how much you're driving. And I desperately needed to get more test days before the season started. And I had my student loan. I was at Edinburgh University. And I thought, okay, but that's going to go towards one day. And it bought me a day in Formula Renault. And thank my lucky stars that obviously it all turned out well. And I was able to repay it when I joined Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah. Just before that, the sponsorship led to, you were in Formula Renault UK from 2001 to 2004, British F3. Then you broke your ankle and things changed significantly, didn't they? You kind of lost momentum in your racing career. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate and definitely one of the hardest times of my life. I actually had a full season ahead of British F3 and I broke my ankle in the January and it was clear by the March that I would miss the whole season. I lost my sponsor, I lost my seat in the team. And those were dark, dark days because I had really lost all the momentum. And the longer you're out of racing, the tougher it is to come back. But it was at the end of that season, I started testing in World Series by Renault. But it wasn't until the following February that I got the now very famous call from Gerhard Unger to come and
Yeah, the phone rang.
The phone rang, and I'm thankful to this day for that phone call and that chance.
And what happened next?
They invited me to come out to Barcelona to test the DTM car, and they'd actually seen my name because I'd been nominated twice for British Young Driver of the Year award. I was nominated twice and made the finals but didn't win. But they saw me up on stage at the Autosport Awards, and I had driven the car because they test all 6 finalists. So I knew the car. So when I arrived in Barcelona, instead of being maybe nervous that it could go wrong, or I just had nothing to lose. It was my last chance to really salvage something from my racing career. So I gave it all I had. I loved driving the car. And 10 days later, I was invited to come back to Stuttgart. And that was it. I was offered a 1 year contract. And then when that 1 year was up, a new 3 year contract. And I stayed for 7 years in DTM.
Yeah, incredible. Did you feel during your DTM time that you had sort of achieved almost at that point everything that you wanted to achieve? What were your goals and ambitions at that stage?
I was this incredibly ambitious and fierce young driver who, when I joined Mercedes, they wanted to give me 20 kilos less than my teammates because they said that will help you race at the front. And whether I was just too naive or too fierce, I said, no, 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 no. I don't need any help. I can race at this level on the same weight because I believe I'm capable of it. And if I look back at that young girl today, I think, wow, I had so much confidence in my own abilities. But in DTM, if you're not in the factory team, you're not racing in the newest car. So it became very quickly clear that I would be racing in the midfield with the idea that if I could get good enough results, I could move up into the factory team. But somehow those results, they never materialized. And that was one of the big disappointments for me because I felt I was capable of more. And I never really got to show. And I think over those seasons, my confidence actually started to wane because when you're giving it everything and not getting the results back, you start, doubt starts to creep in. And it got to the stage where I was comfortable. I was a works Mercedes-Benz driver. I was earning great money. I was representing one of the greatest brands, automotive brands in the world. But my gut feeling started screaming, you need more. This is not what you agreed to settle on. And this idea that I had to push myself further and that the DTM story in a way had come to its natural end. And it's very tough when I look back now because a lot of people say, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I just know it can't be this. I was so reliant on my gut feeling that I had to move on to something different because I'm a great believer. If you don't close one door and end one chapter, you can't start the next. And for me, it was very clear by that point that the DTM wasn't for me anymore.
So tell us what happened next.
Well, I wrote to Norbert Haug, my boss at the time, to tell him that it would be my last season of DTM. And everyone was very shocked, and rightly so. And I was obviously very grateful for the opportunity they'd given me. But I didn't know what was coming next. But I had started to explore maybe racing in the US, maybe doing something completely different. And at that time, my husband was already invested in the Williams Formula One team with a minority shareholding. And Frank Williams came to one of the DTM rounds, also because two of my teammates then were former drivers of his, Ralf Schumacher and David Coulthard. And I was introduced to Frank, obviously not just as a racer, but also as Toto's wife, and told him, he was quite shocked at the speed and the brutality of the DTM cars. And I explained to him that it was be my last season because actually my big dream was to drive a Formula One car. And I'll be very honest, was it because I was Toto's wife, or was it because I was a young Scottish female driver? He said, I'll give you 20 laps. I'll give you 20 laps in my Formula One car. And that's all it was ever supposed to be at Silverstone at the end of the season.
That was in 2012? Do I have that right?
That was in 2012, yeah.
Okay. And then what followed? Describe to us the 20 laps.
Well, my view was very much, it was just, me maybe managing to live out a childhood dream of driving a Formula One car. I didn't have any more expectations than just getting that one opportunity and trying to do a really, really good job. And the team were fantastic because they really got me ready for the opportunity. And there had been a young woman testing for another team that had a very bad accident. And they said, okay, well, that's just not going to happen with us. You are going to feel so comfortable in that car when you jump in. And a Formula One car is incredibly complex. And just getting out of the pits, knowing all the buttons, feeling like you're in command of the car. Took lots of days in the simulator. I did straight line tests. they really put me in the best possible position to succeed. And I'll never forget waking up on the day it was slightly damp, and I thought, oh, that's all I need, a damp track for my first time in an F1 car. But thankfully, the first run was a bit damp, and by the second run, it had dried out and it went very well. And of course, there was a huge amount of media interest in a woman being back in an F1 car. And the then CEO at the time, Adam Parr, said, listen, I think we need to find a way for you to join us in some capacity. And he came up with the idea of, or the title of, a development driver, because the team was already full for the following season. And that's a title that, you know, lives on in Formula One to this day as a development driver. And that was my start in F1.
And amazingly, for those who didn't know, at that time, this would be in April of 2012 when you were named the development driver. It was the first time since 1992 when Giovanna Amati made 3 attempts at qualifying at the time. I mean, it was history, Susie, at the time, and really paved the way for where you sit today, correct?
At the time, I'd never looked back over history. I'd never tried to be the first, but yeah, it was a big moment that brought extra pressure with it, because I was then suddenly aware of everyone doubting whether a woman could drive a modern day Formula One car. But I never shied away from the competition. Having been in the car and done those 20 laps, I refound my love for racing. I believed in my ability, and I really just grabbed that opportunity. So by the time I took to the track in the FP1 session, I didn't want to just be participating. I absolutely wanted to show that I was quick enough to compete at what is the highest level of motorsport in Formula One.
Yeah, amazing. You would compete again one final time in the 2015 Race of Champions, representing Scotland alongside David Coulthard. And then you were on to other ventures, which I'd like to talk about now. I think most importantly, and a year later, you were one of the first to test the Mercedes-AMG 1. I mean, that in and of itself, in my opinion, is an achievement that is unlike any other. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'd stayed on as a Mercedes-Benz ambassador, and I really feel, obviously now with our family situation anyway, that is my family, the Mercedes family. And when obviously it got talked about, this idea of putting a Formula One engine in a road car, I think everyone thought, okay, that's very ambitious. But that's who Mercedes-Benz AMG are, the ones that try to make the impossible possible. And I was lucky to be one of the test drivers very early on in the development of the car. And I remember just thinking, this is incredible, that this performance and this amount of horsepower is going to be available in a road car. So that's something I was really happy to be a part of. But when the decision to hang up my helmet was very easy, because I was just carrying on as a test driver without any real inclination of actually getting in the car to race. And I think there's only so long you can sit on the sidelines before you need to get back out there. And I felt that the opportunity was slipping away, and I didn't want to just be known as an ex-racing driver. There had to be the next journey in my life. And as a sports person, you always know your sports career will be over quite at some point in your life, and you need to start the next stage of your life. So the decision was easy, but the aftermath was very challenging. Suddenly I lost my whole identity. And I remember just after I stopped, I went to an event with Toto, and someone said, "Oh, and what do you do?" And I suddenly thought, I've spent so many years saying, well, I'm a racing driver. And suddenly, what do I do? Who am I? I was starting from zero again. And as much as that was exciting, it was also daunting. I was sure I had to do something outside of motorsport, because I didn't want to work with Toto. I didn't want to work against him. But after some months of exploration, I tried commentating, but didn't like talking about others trying to achieve, because win or lose, anyone that puts themselves out there, for me, deserves a certain amount of respect. I looked at different investments through Toto's investment office, but then had this one phone call from a gentleman I'd met in Paris to discuss possibly racing for him in Formula E. And he said, "Listen, why don't you come and run my Formula E team for me?" And at the time I thought, he's crazy. I mean, first of all, I've never run a team before. And secondly, I don't even believe in Formula E. But he called me again a couple of weeks later and said, listen, just come to New York. I want you to see it. He lived between New York and Monaco. And I met Alejandro Agag. I went to Brooklyn, could see the Statue of Liberty, saw these electric racing cars, and obviously then at home started hearing that electrification was really gaining momentum within the automotive industry. And I thought, okay, I'll go for it. And
was this
team principal
yes
and a shareholder?
That was Venturi Racing, right?
Venturi Racing was Gildo Pastor.
Right. And what has, I mean, from Formula E at that point now, amazingly, that is 7 years ago that Formula E first started. It still feels like it was around the corner, or that it was just in the most recent past. Tell me about that experience. What was Formula E like, and maybe how did it shape your view of racing and being a team principal?
Well, many people kind of asked me, well, why did you think you had the capabilities of being a team principal? But I studied international business at university before leaving to concentrate on my racing. And I obviously had the huge advantage that I watched my husband, and I had a front row seat watching him, by that time, lead Mercedes to several world championships. And I think my love of racing and that the ability to combine it with the business side. And Gildo Pastor was someone that I knew I could work really well with. He really gave me the keys to the shop and said, listen, do what you think's right. And I'm here in the background if you need me. And I took equity in the team, so I had skin in the game. And he was losing a lot of money. We were last on the grid. And that was a few months of definitely thinking, what have I got myself into here? I had a pile of contracts that weren't right that I had to try and rectify. We didn't have the performance in the team, but those were tough days, but days where I just learned so much. I surrounded myself with great people I'd met over my time in racing, from my new legal counsel to a new technical director. And suddenly 1 year later, we won a race. We had a new title sponsor. And then 3 years later, we were fighting for the world championship. And that was definitely very, very tough years, but very, very good years for my learning in the business world later on.
And you only finished 7 points behind Nick de Vries in the championship of the 21 season. Is that right?
Yeah, and imagine this. So we were Venturi, but we had this supply of the Mercedes-Benz powertrain, and we were fighting Mercedes-Benz. So it was husband against wife for the Formula E World Championship. But I just want to add in that I was running on a fraction of the budget that was so we had a huge efficiency drive on top of trying to beat them. But I think it really showed that with energy, and despite the fact we were a small monogas-based team, we took on the might of the big manufacturers because we had the right people, we had a great energy, and we were fighters, and we had two great drivers, and yeah, we nearly pulled off.
Does Formula E have a solid opportunity to gain a foothold in the psyche of racing fans?
It was really interesting because at the time when I was in Formula E, there was a lot of media noise around the fact that it could actually rock the establishment and be a challenge to Formula One. And at the time, there was so much momentum behind Formula E, and then suddenly COVID hit, and we couldn't go racing anymore because the whole philosophy in Formula E was racing in city centres. Formula One got racing much quicker because they managed to create bubbles. And suddenly this show called Drive to Survive appeared, and Formula One's popularity just skyrocketed. And I had anyway at the time, Gildo had decided to kind of do a new space venture, so wanted to sell the team. And without even realizing at the time that Formula E was maybe not going to carry on with such a big progression, we had sold the team. And I think now Formula E still has a very solid footing. But I don't think anyone anticipated that Formula One would grow as big as it has in the last 5 years.
Does that still surprise you and those in your household?
Surprised, but also we're very grateful. We're very grateful for how many people love our sport, how many people watch our sport and come to the races. we don't take that for granted. And I think that big battle in 2021, it didn't end well for Lewis and Mercedes, but everyone was engrossed in that season, that big, fight at the end. And in that, in combination with Drive to Survive, just opened the sport up to so many more people. And that's something which, yeah, we still thank our lucky stars that it's grown so much in popularity.
It's hard to imagine, and actually harkens back a little bit to the comment that you made earlier about young women being interested in the sport. I've been to numerous tracks in the United States that previously, decades ago, would not have attracted a single female fan under the age of 25 because they, frankly, wouldn't have been interested. And now, Austin and Miami and Las Vegas are full of young fans, male and female. It's a crazy turnaround.
It is, and how lucky we are. I mean, the 42% of the female global fan base is now female. The fastest growing fan demographic is the 18 to 24-year-old female. And I remember the minute I realized something had changed, Toto and I exited an airport and there was lots of girls screaming. And I was thinking, what are they here for? And suddenly they started shouting, Toto, Toto. And I thought, oh, they're here for you. And he's like, are they here for me? Like, wow, this shows you how much the sport has developed in such a short space of time.
I'm sure it's changed your personal life. I mean, where you go and what you do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we get sometimes better tables in restaurants. That's definitely helpful. But, we keep our feet firmly on the ground. Of course, Toto is very visible in his role in F1 and obviously with the success the team had in the past. But we stay humble, we stay true to who we are, and we keep our feet firmly on the ground.
But all of that can only be providing more fuel for what you're trying to do. And some people probably wouldn't know that when you worked alongside Rob Jones, CEO of the Motorsports Association, to co-found Dare to Be Different, that was almost 10 years ago, Susie. I mean, no Drive to Survive, no Miami, Las Vegas, Formula One, and no one's screaming anyone's name.
No, and I remember so distinctly when I decided to stop racing, the one thing I did want to do was give back because I had spent my whole life being the only one, the only woman. And I very much wanted to make sure that the next generation saw more successful women in the sport and had more opportunity. And Motorsport UK, the governing body of British motorsport, had always been very supportive of my career. So I called the then CEO and said, listen, can we do an initiative together where we just open the sport up and get more young girls to kart tracks, to understand that there's more opportunities in the sport? And he loved the idea, and Dare to Be Different was a big success. And it actually got picked up by the global governing body, the FIA, and it became Girls on Track, which is a very successful program to this day. So that's something which I'm definitely proud of. And we were slightly ahead of our time.
Indeed you were. So let's fast forward to 2025 now. You've already announced that you're increasing more cars for this coming season. You're off to obviously a solid start with the foundation that you've built there, but you've said this is a long-term project with F1 Academy. And you also said we'll only see the results midterm. So what do you expect out of this year? What if we sit here and talk a year from now in February 26? What do you want to check off the list? What are your to-dos this year?
Well, I want to provide great racing because I think fundamentally now being on the F1 race weekends, we want to be a great support series. So we want to make sure that with 18 cars now, we're providing great racing for people to enjoy. And then secondly, we need more people coming to watch and enjoy Formula One Academy. And I think a big turning point for us will hopefully be our own docuseries that launches in Netflix in May. Really has gone deep behind the scenes, lots of access to really open up the challenges our drivers face, the challenges of building up F1 Academy, so that people really, and if we can have just a fraction of the success that Drive to Survive had, I will be very happy. But then just educate more people as to what F1 Academy is and how this sport is no longer just a man's world.
Yeah, indeed. The Netflix debuts in the spring, and how long will it last?
7 episodes.
7. Okay. And what is the title?
To be decided. We don't quite know yet.
Okay. All right. We will watch for that. I know that you also you want to create opportunities for women off track, which is very difficult, because it involves things like STEM subjects. How important is even getting into the educational piece of this for young women important to you?
It's very important. Together with the F1 teams, there's so many initiatives out there. I mean, obviously, getting into F1, I think Mercedes recently had a position free, and they got 4,000 applications. So it's very
Wow.
competitive to get to the pinnacle of the sport. But there are so many opportunities in the sport widely that I think it's about really understanding, okay, what opportunities can we create, and how can we make sure we have more women applying for the opportunities? Because in the end, it will always come down to talent. You need to be good enough. But if we get more young women applying for the roles and the opportunities and the internships and the work placements, we have more chance of there being more women in the sport, and them then progressing up to the pinnacle. And it's really about shining a spotlight and making sure that we get those opportunities out there, because obviously we don't employ engineers ourselves as F1 Academy. But it really is fundamentally, creating those role models for women to look up to, and making sure that we create the accessibility that they can come into this sport and be successful.
Give us some names of some drivers to watch this year. Who do you like that's out there that we need to pay attention to?
Well, Jason, I have to be very careful, because I never like to look like I'm favoring one driver.
Not that you're favoring, no.
Because I want them all to grab this opportunity and go on to great things. I think there will be a clear, hard fight between the Ferrari and Mercedes driver, Maya Vuk and Dorian Palm, because both were quite strong in 24. We also have some quite good drivers coming in. Chloe Chambers switches to Red Bull. She'll be one to watch. We have the new McLaren driver, Ella Lloyd, who looks to be very promising. So I do think you'll see, and we're shaking up the racing a little bit for the reverse grid. You could see some different winners. I don't expect to see domination like we did in 2024.
Yeah, wonderful. Just a couple of other subjects here. Having the right trajectory with the Academy also means you have to have the right funding, getting into the right team, getting noticed by the right people. All of those pieces have to come together as a young driver, as a series, really organizationally for you, right? Do you feel that you're getting closer on all of those things, the right funding, the right teams, the right trajectory?
Well, I have to really take my hat off to Formula One and first and foremost to Liberty, because the funding, they have invested heavily to get F1 Academy up and running and to set itself up for success. I certainly believe women's sport is having a big moment, but we also need to make sure in the mid to long term that we're financially sustainable, which means we need to bring great partners on board. We need to have the F1 teams on board, because them being a part of F1 Academy not just helps the whole driver training ground for future success, but also means that they're invested with us to try and make F1 Academy a success. So I really feel that we have the fundamentals in place, but I still keep my feet on the ground, like I said before, and want to make sure that every area we're getting right, and what can we do better? Because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity in this sport, which I actually never thought I would see. But we've got to get it right so that in 10 years, we look back and say, my goodness, look at the amount of talent the F1 Academy has unearthed.
Advice for young women who may listen to this and may hear this, and perhaps they're thinking about karting, or they're in karting, or they're at the next level beyond that?
Start your journey. If you are thinking about it but haven't really looked in detail, there's so much information out there now of opportunities, of pathways. Obviously, with LinkedIn, you can see so many different people in different positions that can be inspiring. And if it's on the track, then get racing. And if you're already racing, we have a very simple criteria. You need to be one of the best and fastest young female talents in the world in any given year, because we will always take the best 18 drivers every season.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. Thank you for telling your story. The The story of tenacity, the story of determination, and now success in the F1 Academy. It is a pleasure to have you on the program, Susie. We're going to have, I think, hopefully some of your young drivers on this program as well. I think that would be a wonderful addition to cars and culture, but it starts with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. It was a great conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.